What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Welcome to week 8 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2024 CFL season. And as I'm sure you can glean, it was not the best of weeks around here. It's back-to-back stinkers, unfortunately, for the picks in week 7. Only 4-8. So again, technically, I didn't have a week worse than the previous week. It got better, but barely. 1-3 straight up. Look, when you go 1-3 straight up, it's not going to be a good week. We know this. We've established this. It's basic math. 1-3 straight up, 1-3 against the spread. I did go even money on the totals, which is basically the only thing that saved me. And the only reason I went 2-2 on the totals is the entire league just shifted in the exact opposite direction that it had been going for the previous couple of weeks. In case anyone wonders why it's way harder to pick the CFL than it is to pick the NFL, and you go, Justin, that's stupid. There's only 9 teams. There's only 4 games. It is way more difficult to pick this league because since there are only 4 games, it is much more adept at wild swings in the opposite direction. The NFL is much more predictable in this. So yeah, still 2 games over 500, picking the league straight up at 15-13. 4 games underwater in each of the betting picks, 12-16 against the spread and over-under. So we're, that's 6 games under 500, I believe. So we're still right there, but obviously this is not the side of 500 that we want to be on. CFL in week 7, CFL fantasy, I should say, in week 7. Like I mentioned, I did take a couple of gambles. My roster last week was down in the pinned comment of last week's episode, though I know a lot of people would have missed it because they got into the episode early and I didn't have the roster out until late. Only 84.1 points, so not a great performance in CFL fantasy. It was about 2,300 across the entire game and just outside the top 250 in Derek Taylor's league. On the season, I'm 754.1, which is just inside the top 2,500 overall and just barely at number 299 inside the top 300 in Derek Taylor's league. My most outstanding player was James Butler last week. They finally figured out how to use him, it seems. He put up 20.3 points, and while I did get more out of, I believe, Justin McInnes, that was with the 2 times captain multiplier, so I am going to give my MOP to James Butler. I'm starting to figure out a general idea of when the CFL fantasy game unlocks their roster. So obviously, since I'm recording this fairly early in the day on Tuesday, it is not unlocked yet. It's probably not going to be for a couple more hours. But in lieu of giving you my actual roster, I'm just going to kind of give you the skeleton of kind of what I'm working with leading into this week. My finalized roster, once again, will be in the top pinned comment down below. Check that out probably later today or possibly tomorrow. But yeah, that roster will have to be there because game's not unlocked yet. Our 4-game slate in week 8 looks like this. The Saskatchewan Roughriders are in Montreal to take on the Alouettes. Alouettes coming into this game off of their bye. Calgary is in Ottawa taking on the REDBLACKS. Winnipeg travels to Toronto to take on the Argos. This is back-to-back road games for the Blue Bombers. And Hamilton, fresh off their first win of the season, is in Edmonton to take on the Elks. And right off the top, like I mentioned, the league just took a wild 180 from where it had been going over the previous couple of weeks. A full-scale course correction in terms of the totals last week as the whole league goes under their betting line point totals after a 7-1 run to the over in the previous 2 weeks. So it was going wildly over and then just completely turned around and all 4 games struggled to produce a ton of points. Home teams are on a super hot streak here over the last 30 days, going 14-4 straight up. But it's worth noting that betting favorites are not covering against the spread. So while the home teams are feasting, so are the betting underdogs. Betting favorites are only 6-12 against the spread in the last 18 games over the previous 30 days. So look, betting dogs, they're paying off. Going to be tough to find much of a margin there this week as, and we'll talk about it, Vegas are cowards. Let's start in Montreal, where the Alouettes are going to play host to a Saskatchewan Roughriders team that took my doubt, my specific doubt that I talked about in the episode last week, and just rubbed it right back in my face with just a defensive gem. The Riders' defense only allowing 266 all-purpose yards, no touchdowns, and 1 pick to Zach Collaros, and no Bombers offensive player other than Brady Oliveira having 60 or more all-purpose yards. Really, really solid performance. Now, Brady Oliveira had 129. He had himself a heck of a game, but no other offensive player for the Bombers had 60 all-purpose yards. It was just a great defensive performance for the Riders, and there were 3-0 in the turnover battle. You generate 3 turnovers, you don't turn the ball over, you're probably going to find success, especially in a tight, low-scoring game. And look, off of a game where they only scored 19 points, I'm still not blown away by Shea Patterson and the offensive upside of this Riders team right now. They absolutely need to be better. They did put up 393 total yards, which is fine, but they were only 1 for 3 in the red zone and 35% on second down. This was not even a solid offensive performance as far as I'm concerned, but this is unmistakably a Grey Cup caliber defense. Also, shout out to rookie wide receiver Aju, 4 catches, $110 in the receiving game. Turning over to Montreal's side now, the Alouettes are sitting pretty at 5-1 coming in after their bye week, but all eyes obviously are going to be on the health and availability of Cody Fajardo. Fajardo has put up back-to-back did not participate in practice on Sunday and on Monday, dealing with a hamstring injury. And look, soft tissue, this is the way this goes. It's so tough to project when somebody will be ready and when the risk of re-aggravating that injury is low enough to be able to let them play. So they're not ready to rule him out yet, and that's come from a couple different sources, that the Alouettes are not ready to rule Fajardo out of playing, but some are reporting that this is the possibility of like a multi-week absence, and once again, soft tissue, it's the nature of the beast. So they're not ready to rule him out yet, but chances are he could be out this week and even longer. We're going to assume that Caleb Evans is going to be starting this game. And assuming that it is Caleb Evans getting the start, he showed in that game 2 weeks ago against Toronto what makes him great and what makes him not great. He only attempted 22 passes. In those 22 passes, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So this is a high event quarterback who's really going to pack those events into even not a ton of pass opportunity. Again, only 22 attempts, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. This Riders defense is no easy ask for Caleb Evans. I did find it interesting that neither one of these teams have lost to the opposing division yet this season. Saski's 3-0 against the East, Montreal's 3-0 against the West. In a battle of backup quarterbacks facing elite defenses, which I think there's an elite defense on both sides of this game, give me the team that's on the rest advantage. AJ Ouellette's not participating in practice. Kyan Schaefer-Baker is not participating in practice either. So there's injuries on both sides of this thing. Give me the team on the rest advantage. I think I got to take the Alouettes in this one, especially where the game's in Montreal. Give me the Alouettes to get the win over the Riders. And you know how I mentioned earlier that Vegas are cowards? This is what I mean by that. There's no lines for this game at all. And I understand that they're like, oh, is Fajardo going to play? Is he not going to play? He's not going to play. He's not going to play. Just because they say we refuse to rule him out doesn't mean that he's going to play. Judge this game based on the fact that neither one of these teams have their normal starting quarterback. It's Shea Patterson and it's Caleb Evans. You're going to get beat sometimes anyway. Just get your cowards, give us a line. So here's the way we're going to play this. I like the Alouettes to win the game straight up. I think the Alouettes are ultimately going to be like a marginal dog in this game. So give me the Alouettes with the points, or whatever the spread is for the Alouettes, I'm going to take it, because they're not going to be heavy favorites, and I don't think they're going to be heavy dogs either. So give me the Alouettes on the spread either way. And I think give me the under on the points here. Again, elite defenses, backup quarterbacks. This game might not get out of the 30s. I'm going to go like 20-16, something like that. So give me the under on the points. Give me the Alouettes against the spread no matter which way it goes. And give me the Owls to win the game outright. Calgary and Ottawa's up next. And we start with the Stampeders. Another gross defensive efficiency showing from Calgary. 11.7 in their game last week. But Jake Maier has one of those peak games like he had in week 1, a peak game for him. 307 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Just, I believe, the second game this season where Jake Maier has not thrown an interception amidst what was a sloppy affair on both sides of that football game. The two teams combining for 23 penalties and 250 yards in penalties. Calgary accounting for 180 of those on 12 penalties. You know I don't love that. And listen, I know I've been ragging on Calgary's defense here for the last couple of weeks. They had 2 interceptions in this game. I'm not going to take those 2 picks away from them. As a matter of fact, they now have 9 on the season as a secondary, which ranks number 2 in the CFL. I'm not going to take those splash play turnovers away from them, but this lack of efficiency on the defensive side does force Jake Maier to have games like that and essentially be perfect if Calgary wants to find success. Most of the time, Jake Maier is not perfect. He has progressed from last season. There's actually a really great article on CFL.ca talking about his progression. And all of that is true. But if you take away the 2 games where he didn't throw an interception, we talked about it last week. It's 6 touchdowns to 5 picks. That efficiency is still not there. And if Jake Maier is not perfect, this defense I don't think is good enough to win your average football game. On Ottawa's side of things, the REDBLACKS beat Edmonton in back-to-back weeks, this time 20-14, I think the final score was, despite a no touchdown and 2 interception performance from Drew Brown. Really not much to speak of offensively in this game on either side, under 600 total yards between those 2 teams, and just 1 offensive touchdown that I believe came from Reichwell Armstead. Obviously, this being Drew Brown's first season as what is basically a full-time starting quarterback, we're through a third of the season now. 6 games. Drew Brown is on pace for 4,500 passing yards, which means he would have pushed 2023 Vernon Adams for the most passing yards in the league. I think Vernon had 4,700 something last year. Brown's on pace for 4,500. He's on pace to challenge that number. He's not going to challenge what VA is going to do this year, but last year he's on pace for that. But only on pace for 15 touchdowns and 12 picks. You know who he really reminds me of? Last year's Jake Maier. I want to state for the record, I think the Calgary Stampeders are the better football team between these two. Given everything I've said about their defense, I still think this is the better football team in Calgary. The Stampeders have not won on the road yet this year. Ottawa has not lost at home this year. Ottawa's also 3-1 against the West. Granted, 2 of those games are against Edmonton. But, situationally speaking, I'm going to take the REDBLACKS in this game. They're a very, very marginal home underdog. They're a dog of plus 1.5. I think they win this game outright. So give me the REDBLACKS at home to beat Calgary, and I'll take the plus 1.5 against the spread on the REDBLACKS as well. Total in this game set at 51.5 points. I think I'm going to stick under on this. I don't expect Jake Maier to have back-to-back weeks where he has performances like that. So if he's not going to pop off, I don't love the offensive upside in this football game on either side. So while I think it pushes 50 at 51.5, I'm going to stay under on the number. Give me like a 26-23 in favor of the REDBLACKS. Maybe Lewis Ward kicks a game-winning field goal because that's just what Lewis Ward does. So REDBLACKS win straight up, plus 1.5 on Ottawa as well, under on the 51.5 point total. Off to Toronto now, where the Argonauts will welcome the Winnipeg Blue Bombers into town. Winnipeg on the tail end of back-to-back road games and still waiting for their first bye week of the season. The Bombers' offense dries up last week after a Week 6 breakout. Last week's game was Zach Collaros' 4th game this season, where he attempted at least 30 passes and had no touchdowns to show for it. And why do I bring that up? That feels like such an obscure stat. Do you know how far back in Zach Collaros' career you have to go to find the last season where he had more than one in the same season, one game in the same season, where he attempted 30 passes and had no touchdowns to show for it? You have to go all the way back to 2018. That's why it's so out of character. And that's why I've been kind of harping on him harder than I normally would. Because this is an unprecedented season for Zach Collaros, and not in a good way. The 19-9 loss against Saskatchewan last week was doubly sinful because it was a masterclass of defensive efficiency. A 20.7 is what the Bombers defense threw up in terms of defensive efficiency. And in case you haven't been following along at home, those are elite numbers. Those are better than any other team in the CFL has done over the previous 4 games. Like 20.7 is a masterclass. Held that team to 4 field goals and just a lone touchdown. It should be a 100% winning formula for this football team. For some reason, it's not. The story is not much rosier for the Toronto Argos, who dropped the first battle of the QEW in Hamilton last week, 27-24, I want to say the final score was, I think. A game where Cameron Dukes was benched for Nick Arbuckle. Hello, old friend. So, Nick Arbuckle and this CFL community have something of a sordid history. But Dukes gets benched, Arbuckle gets brought in, and he actually engineers like a 14-point comeback that does wind up falling just a little bit short. Are we really talking about a quarterback controversy here in Toronto with Nick Arbuckle as part of it? Despite the fact that the Argos had over 34 minutes of time of possession in that game, it still took that quarterback change for them to have a shot at that game last week against Hamilton, which, again, Hamilton has not had a good season. Cameron Dukes, just 1 touchdown to 5 interceptions and a mere 716 passing yards in his last 4 games. With a bad defense, it's not a recipe for success. That actually makes this game super difficult to predict. Normally, you would say Winnipeg by 50. You can't really do that with the way their offense is playing right now. Yes, they had that breakout in week 6, but beyond that, this offense has not been good. Like, Brady Oliveira aside, because Brady's always good. But I just don't think I can bring myself to back an Argos team that might be forced to turn to Nick Arbuckle against a defense playing as well from an efficiency perspective as Winnipeg is. So, like, that Winnipeg defense is more than capable of stealing this game, of dominating this game, in fact. And I would say they're the only positional group in this game that has a chance to do that. Despite everything that's going against them, despite Collaros struggling so much, despite the tail end of back-to-back road games, despite still waiting for their first bye week of the season, I keep harping on that. How is it possible that a team goes this late into the year without a bye week? Even with all that going against them, situationally speaking, I like the Bombers in this matchup. I just don't have a lot of confidence in the Argos right now. So give me Winnipeg to win this game. Let's take the Bombers on the road in Toronto to get the win over the Argos. On the line, the Argos are laying -1 as a very marginal home favorite in this matchup. I like Winnipeg to win, so give me the +1, I suppose, against the spread. Once again, Vegas is just cowardly with these lines this week. There's no margin, there's no discussion either way. So it feels like one of those weeks you're either going to go like 8-0 or 0-8. So anyway, give me the Bombers to win and give me the Bombers plus the single point. Total in the game set at 49.5 points. I like the under here. I think this Winnipeg defense dominates and wins this football game. So give me actually a pretty strong under on this one. I don't think this game gets out of the 30s. Give me like a 24-14 in favor of the Bombers. Bombers win. Bombers cover the +1. and give me the under on the points. And the last game we're going to look at is the Hamilton Ticats traveling to Edmonton to take on the Elks. On the Ticats side, they finally, mercifully, get off the schneid with a 3-point win over the Argos last week that they still did everything in their power to try and lose. Like, it's mythic at this point. But as it turns out, when you use James Butler like James Butler, he had 15 touches, 103 all-purpose yards and a rush touchdown. Good things might happen for your offense. Speaking of the offense, shout out Tim White. A much maligned beginning to the season for Tim White, but his last 3 games, 18 catches, 239, and a receiving touchdown from a couple of weeks ago. The Ticats also won the turnover battle in this game 3-1 and forced 3 fumbles. They made good things happen, and by God, somehow they held on. On Edmonton's side of things, the Elks dropped that low-event game against Ottawa, like we mentioned before. Though, you know, when you're a team like the Elks who are winless, you're looking for positives. You just fired the head coach. You just fired the GM. A low-event chess match might be the kind of game that you want. And it was another instance for Edmonton of doing a lot of good things. They had 4 quarterback sacks in this game. They won the turnover battle. It was 3-2, but they still won it. They did some good things in that game. Geno Lewis had a good game. But not having a defense that can get you key stops, it's killer. It's just killer. And like the second that when Ottawa got the ball back late in the fourth quarter, I thought there's a good chance they just run this clock out entirely. Also, hey, remember when they said that we're going to have built-in plays and built-in contributions from Trey Ford? 2 pass attempts and a 3-yard carry. Whose daughter did this guy flirt with? Like, what did he do? He must have done something. So like we talked about, the league has been trending underdog really, really hard in the last couple of weeks. So maybe Hamilton, who come into this game as a 2.5-point dog on the road, is the smart play here. Maybe you just take the points and don't think about it. I have to believe the efficiency numbers. And the efficiency numbers say the Edmonton Elks are the better football team. And how could you watch that game with Hamilton last week and have any faith whatsoever that even if they have a marginal lead going into the fourth quarter, they can hold on to it? I don't expect a blowout here either way. So in a tight game, I think I'm going to lean on these efficiency numbers. I believe in them enough that I'm going to take the Edmonton Elks to get the win at home over the Ticats. I also just can't see the Ticats winning 2 straight games. I'm just not seeing it. I'm going to have them lay the -2.5. I'm going to kind of hold my nose, lay the -2.5. It's a small price to pay. Let's lay the -2.5. Total in the game set at 52.5 points. It is our biggest total of the week. Obviously not knowing Montreal and Saskatchewan. I'm going to go over on it, I think, because again, I don't trust either one of these defenses. So with the defenses kind of being bad and 2 quarterbacks that I think can certainly put up numbers in Bo Levi Mitchell and McLeod Bethel Thompson, I think I got to go over on this. Over 52.5 points in Hamilton, Edmonton. Give me a 30-27 final for the Edmonton Elks, who win, cover, and give me the over. Now, let me give you an idea of kind of a skeleton of what I'm looking at in CFL Fantasy this week. Once again, the team has not unlocked yet, so I can't actually set my lineup. That'll be in a pinned comment down below once I get it set. But here's kind of the direction that I'm looking in at each position. In terms of quarterback, I think it's either McLeod Bethel Thompson or Bo Levi Mitchell. That might depend on price, but I also don't expect that you're going to be spending a ton of money this week. Running back, I'm pretty set. I think I'll probably go Kadeem Carey in this matchup. Winnipeg's given up the most rush yards in the league this year. James Butler, it kind of looks like maybe Hamilton might be using him the way they're supposed to. In terms of my second running back, I'm definitely locked in on Raquel Armstead. Calgary has struggled against the run this year. In fact, they're the only team in the CFL who's giving up more than 6 yards per carry. I might even look at like a Walter Fletcher. Even though Saskatchewan's run defense has been very good, the secondary's been bad. So I like the prospects of Fletcher catching 5, 6, maybe 7 balls this week. At wide receiver, Tyson Philpott, even though he's not going to have Cody Fajardo in all likelihood, he's still probably the most game-breaking wide receiver in any game this week. Tim White, we talked about. Tim White has been improving the last couple of weeks. Geno Lewis, I think, is a guy, especially if I take MBT at quarterback, to stack him with Geno Lewis, who has 29 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks. That, I think, would be a smart play on my part. Justin Hardy had another strong week last week. I might look at Reggie Begelton as well, because I think he's another guy that could be absolutely game-breaking for Calgary against Ottawa. In the flex position, other than Shamar Bridges, I like to try to snipe touchdowns. So I might be looking at like Hergy Mayala, who's got 4 touchdowns on the year. Keandre Smith, same deal. So that might depend on which quarterback I go with. I might try to snipe like a double stack touchdown there somewhere. Markin Michel or Sean Bain might be options there as well. I should have the money either way, especially because I think Sean Bain might be close to 10K. But I should have the money there. He would be another guy to try to snipe a touchdown. And on the defensive side, it's going to be one of 3. It's either going to be the Owls, the Riders, or the Bombers. Once again, I'll have my finalized CFL fantasy roster in the pinned comment down below. That is it. Those are the picks. We'll go over them here with you one more time. Got the Montreal Alouettes at home beating the Saskatchewan Roughriders 20-16. Take the Owls straight up. Take the Owls with whatever it is against the spread, because we don't know yet, because Vegas are cowards. And give me the under on whatever the point total is. I'm going to take the Ottawa REDBLACKS at home to beat the Calgary Stampeders 26-23. I like the plus 1.5 on Ottawa, and give me the under, a marginal under, on the 51.5 point total. I like the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on the road in Toronto to beat the Argos 24-14. Give me the plus 1 on Winnipeg and under on the 49.5 point total. And I got the Edmonton Elks getting their first win of the season, beating the Hamilton Ticats 30-27 in Hamilton. Give me the minus 2.5 on Edmonton and an over on the 52.5 point total. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it. That is the show for this week. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in and checking it out. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Enjoy the games in Week 8. We're crossing both our fingers and crossing all our toes that we got some better results this week. We'll see you again in Week 9.